Hello there, La-di-das and national spectators, and welcome to our latest episode of the La-di-da Times, the video podcast edition here. I am Jeff Cougar Kozlowski, and we are just a few days post World Tournament of Historic Baseball held at Greenfield Village here. And today we're going to do a little recap both of the 1867 version of the World Tournament, which we've covered in previous episodes, but never hurts for a refresher. And then we'll talk about how this most recent World Tournament went, how that went through, and comments from that. And as for that, we have our resident historian, umpire, announcer, player, you name it, he does it. Mr. Marcus Dixon is joining me once again. Marcus, thank you again for joining me today.
Always glad to.
It's funny that we were during the championship game a few days ago, and I actually had, believe it or not, somebody came up to me and asked when we were going to do the next episode. So
somebody's watching.
It's the little show that could. Look at us. So for those of you who are watching or listening, we truly do appreciate it. We do it as a means, as a learning means. But, I always enjoy Marcus's company, and gosh, I hope he enjoys mine. Otherwise, this would be a very ruinous few minutes for him to be doing this here. So the World Tournament of Historic Baseball, it just wrapped up. This was the 22nd anniversary of the 2003 rebirth of the World Tournament, and the 158th anniversary of the original one, held back in Detroit in 1867. And for this, Marcus, I want to kind of bring you in here. This is really this is our ultimate of the summer. This is what we really ultimately build towards over the course of the whole year. And no disrespect to any of the other teams that come in over the course of the summer, that you do us an incredible favor for doing that here. But the World Tournament really is what a lot of eyes are on us from that. So, but we had to start this tournament that we have at Greenfield Village. It had to come from somewhere. Okay, and that's where I kind of want to look to you, Marcus, about this here. When we've hosted this, and the more and more people come in, the more and more the nickname Worlds gets thrown in. This idea, like when something gets called Worlds, you get this connection, like this is the best of the best everywhere on Earth. To be playing this or to be doing this here. We calling it the World Tournament of Historic Baseball, this isn't necessarily us trying to be, the best of the best of the best here. Could you run us through, Marcus, why was this tournament called the World Tournament of Baseball? And what's the origin story of how we got here?
Well, the main thing was that it was an aspiration, right? That you had this club in Detroit, the Detroit Baseball Club, and they had been making a bit of a name for themselves. If we go back to even 1860, I remember the National Association of Baseball Players held their first convention in 1858, and it was all New York and Brooklyn, and maybe a few clubs from New Jersey, a few from Philadelphia, but in 1860. This club from the far west, all the way out in Detroit, went to New York to be part of the National Association of Baseball Players convention. And it's important for us to remember that there was no video, there was no way to actually, if you weren't there to see the game, to compare how good teams were. So the Detroit Baseball Club was winning many of their games. And so they seemed to be really good, and they thought of themselves as being really good, and they wanted to be on the baseball map. They wanted to bring the attention of the baseball world to Detroit. And so they, as was common at the time, when they hosted a tournament, they were not going to participate in the tournament. But having all of the great clubs come to the tournament would have brought a lot of attention. So they offered money to the top named clubs, the best known clubs, the Eckfords and the Excelsiors and the Mutuals of New York and Brooklyn and the Olympics of Philadelphia. They were willing to pay to bring these clubs to Detroit so that there could truly be a best in the country tournament. And what happened was that none of those teams came. None of them. And so when this tournament had been aspirationally named the World's Baseball Tournament, and my sense is that nobody wanted to rename it. And also, they didn't know until pretty late who exactly would be coming. So they had a tournament named the World's Baseball Tournament, hoping for people to come from New York and Philadelphia and Washington, D.C., and they didn't. But the tournament went forward with teams coming from Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Pennsylvania, and Ontario. So really it was the world was the Midwest. And so that was their hope. That was what they called it. If you look at the list of the clubs who did appear, very few of them have any real recognition today. If they're recognized at all, it's because somebody has recreated them. But when the Henry Ford and when Greenfield Village decided to increase their investment in the baseball program at Greenfield Village, they looked for a historical hook. What will we build our historical moment on? And they identified this tournament in Detroit in 1867 and created a new version called the World's Tournament of Historic Baseball. And so now we have had, as you said, this is the 22nd anniversary of of our World Tournament. They only had one in Detroit because it was a good event, but there was nothing about the event that led to the feeling that it ought to be recreated. And also, the Detroit club started to get beat. The Detroit club fancied themselves among the best clubs in the country. But when they played a game against the second place club in the tournament, the Allegheny Club of Pennsylvania, they were beaten pretty handily. And so in a lot of ways, the whole motivation of the Detroit club to promote their reputation and promote the reputation of Detroit baseball, that motivation had really fallen apart in some ways. They just weren't the club that they thought that they might be once. They were the classic big fish in a small pond. And as other fish came into that pond, that really became clear.
Yeah, especially when you look at their record also, like very, very shortly, either before or after the tournament here, they lose a game to the University of Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
So if the idea of a team losing to college students, that was just kind of an unheard of thing. You can definitely tell why it takes the wind out of their sails there. But so Detroit Baseball Club is the host. But they're not, they start to, like you said, they start to lose some games there, but there's also some logistical issues in Detroit with the actual operation of the tournament itself. Sure. Here. So Marcus, can you answer to, what's how many teams are there and how many fields do we got?
Well, 23 teams, and they divided themselves into the class. So first class was presumably the best teams, second class and third class. There was a bit of controversy about that where the third class teams, people expected them to be more like a junior club. But there were some clubs of very adult males who declared themselves third class clubs. And there was a little bit of sense around that. But 23 clubs, and they made the decision to play the whole thing on one field. So we played 17 games, in 2 days, and they played 17 games in a week, and we played 20 some games in 2 days at our tournament. And so it was definitely a more leisurely affair. Also, challenges of these were primarily working men, and many of them had, if they weren't going to be playing for a couple of days, they needed to travel back home and go to work. There's one game that was delayed because their pitcher hadn't made it back. The trains were running late, and so they were stuck without one of their major players. And so there were a lot of logistical issues there that could have been addressed by having multiple fields, playing more games. But they wanted the ceremony, I think. They wanted to be an event, a big event. And of course, that led to a lot of business for the hotels and a lot of business for the restaurants, which was seen as pretty positive.
So we've got a tournament calling itself the World Tournament, which you mentioned is very aspirational in its ideas. Marcus, how does a team in 1867 or 66 or 65, does any team have a legitimate claim to say we are truly the best team in the nation? And if so, like, how does one go about saying that? Because we don't have a World Series until 1903. Right. So how does a team, say with truth and honesty that we're the best?
Well, you couldn't say that with certainty because given the spread of baseball around the country and the distances traveled, typically clubs played clubs that were close by. When a club like the National Baseball Club of Washington, D.C. went on a 10-game tour through the Midwest, that was new. That was, a really unusual thing. It began to happen more thereafter, but so typically you only read about clubs from far away. So you had that situation where Detroit had previously been kind of the best of us around here, and they presumed that meant they were equal to the best around New York. Not true. But so that was the assumption. How they determined the champion club, and Haney's, by the way, makes it very clear that there is no official process for determining the champion club. And then Chadwick says, but given that, let me give you some rules on how to determine a champion club. Essentially, it was like boxing. How do you become the champion boxer? You beat the current champion boxer. And so it was a typical 3-game series. And so if you defeated the current champion in a 3-game series, you became the champion club. And so it wasn't like an end of the season thing. There could be multiple changes in the champion during a season. And whoever had the championship, quote, pennant at the end of the season was that year's champion. So I've always loved that the champion of 1867 was the Union Club of Morrisania, which never won the championship before, never won it again. And essentially what happened is relatively late in the 1867 season, they beat the current champion in a 3-game series, and then they just essentially refused to play series against anybody else for the rest of the season, so that when the season ended, they were the champion club. There was a little bit of bad blood about that at the time. But that's how you became the champion. That was, you beat the current champion. But, for example, a couple of years in the future, I think everybody would agree that the Red Stockings of Cincinnati were the best club in the country. They were 54-0, but they never played the established champion clubs in New York. And so they never won the championship pennant, even though most people would say they were the champion club or they were the best club.
Yeah, and who's to say, there's other teams, and I know there's lots of sources and books that talk about this, about some team that springs up and says, hey, we want to be talked about as the best overall, and then they beat some like scraped 9 bunch of farmers around and say, see, undefeated, come at us, and like as if the Eckfords or the Atlantics are going to go all the way out to Des Moines to beat this team that sprung up, played 1 game, claims to be the champion, and then barely does anything ever again there. So the World Tournament, seems to have like, good hopes, good intentions, but we've got some logistical issues. we see that the Detroit Baseball Club may not be quite as good as they had thought that they were. And then we've got Jackson. Now we've got Jackson, Michigan here. Jackson and Detroit don't particularly care for one another, to put it lightly. Marcus, how does Jackson, Michigan fit into this whole thing?
Well, there had been baseball in Jackson for almost about as long as there had been in Detroit. The first game between two clubs was in Detroit in 1859, which is about when baseball began in Jackson as well. But when the club from Jackson submitted their roster to participate in the World Tournament, they listed it as unknown. They were the unknowns, and they listed all the player names as unknown. And from Jackson's perspective, they were still deciding who their players would be. The newspapers made some commentary, and the word on the street was that the unknowns weren't a real baseball club. It's important for us to remember that it was a big deal then to be part of a club. You had to apply to be a member of a club. They reviewed you not just for how well you could play, but what kind of a gentleman you were. And you had to be a member of one club for at least 30 days before you could play in a game representing that club. And there were lots of complaints to the National Association's adjudication board about games that were played with people who weren't legitimate, because they hadn't been members of that club for 30 days. They had come over after 15 days. And so the complaint about the Jackson Club was that people said they weren't a real club and that the people were not really members of that single club for 30 days. One piece of evidence is that some of the players were from the University of Michigan, which also had a club, and that these people had played on. So there were questions about the legitimacy of the Jackson Club. Jackson's response was, back in 1865, when Detroit won the state of Michigan championship held in Bay City, Detroit seems to have imported a player from New York. And even though the rules were very clear that you don't pay players, it seems like that person was getting some, if not direct pay, they were definitely getting some under the table play that helped Detroit in 1865. And so Jackson's perspective was, we're all from Jackson. What are you saying when we know what you did in 1865? And so there was a little bit of mud being thrown each way. So there was bad blood between the two. The result of it was that the Detroit club, not being the hosts who didn't participate, were supposed to play a friendly game against the tournament victors at the end of the tournament. And the Jackson club just said, we're not going to do that. We are not going to play the Detroit. So Detroit ended up playing the second place club, the Alleghenies, in that friendly game, which Detroit lost.
It's always fun, looking back at just seeing the, as you mentioned, Marcus, the back and forth between Detroit papers and Jackson papers. Is again, we don't have anything, technological where you get the instantaneous thing. It's like you're waiting for that response in the paper, and then when it comes, it's, hey, wait a minute, that's not us, and
right.
It kind of comes to be there. So so you could really kind of point to this and say, well, Detroit's not quite the team that they thought that they were. The champions were not terribly happy about what they had to do or what they perceived the host said they had to do. You've got a tournament that takes a week and a half between 23 teams. To my memory, Mark, is it also single elimination?
Yes, each bracket is a single, the three classes, and within each class it was a single elimination.
So you got a single elimination tournament. So you could come all this way, and get stuck on, a field that is perhaps at some point got rained on, is probably
right.
Not in great conditions. And that's a big thing, we always have to think about in vintage baseball here is like the fields that we have, yeah, they're just regular, green grass and all that. But I'd venture to say they're probably even better taken care of than what any players in the 1860s would have actually played on too. They've got a field, like a legit field, as opposed to at least we cut the grass.
Well, it varied a lot. The larger clubs, including the Detroit Baseball Club, would lease a field for the season or for multiple seasons. And so they cared for it. But they certainly were not groundskeepers in the way we think of groundskeepers. And the things that we do to roll a field and everything might not be the case. But they would have set up, have some bleachers for the ladies and things like that. But when the season was over, the field would often return to being used for field purposes. And the one where these games were played was at the terminus of the Woodward Avenue horse trolley line, essentially, and which is at Woodward and Alexandrine, where the Majestic Theater is now. And so, that was pretty far out of the city at that time. We would think of that as being downtown Detroit, but at the time that was not downtown at all. That was the end of the line, of the trolley.
Yeah, it's so, some of these teams, if you're in a good spot, I'm sure you've got a really nice field, but there may be some teams out here in the Midwest that the game is just starting to catch on. There's
right.
no real promise or guarantee that you're going to get something nice. So,
well, and by day 5, when you've had 3 games a day on a field, and it did rain some days, the start was delayed by due to rain on some days, and we know just on our field how it can get torn up by a couple of games.
Mm-hmm.
By the end of the tournament, it certainly wasn't in good condition. But to your earlier point, you travel here from Indiana, and you play on the first or second day, you get beat, and you go home. And that was it. That was your participation in the tournament.
And I think that's one of the ways that we've changed our world tournament, in that we used to have 16 teams that would come in, but we also had 3 fields that would be going, but there was a very real chance that you would be done after day 1. And so
right.
There could be teams that traveled a very long distance. Yeah. You played 3 or 4 games on Saturday. Great job. If you lost 2 games on Saturday, you're done
right.
for. So we've changed it now to kind of honor that 3 class mentality here, except in our
right.
sense, you have to earn your way into those 3 classes, as opposed to, yeah, what do you think, guys? Are we a 3rd class team? Oh yeah, we're definitely a 3rd class. And then
exactly.
What was the 3rd class championship ends at 39-1 after 5 innings.
Right.
And everybody just says, okay, we got it. Yep, you can stop now. We got other teams that got to play here. So let's dive into our tournament here in the 2025 version here. Marcus, you were there for both days. I was there for both days. What were some of your takeaways from what you saw, either on the field, off the field, among teams? What do you remember from these past couple of days?
Well, there were several things. One is that there may have been things I was not aware of, but I was not aware of problems. I was not aware of bad blood that occurred. What I experienced was that real sense that they talked about in the Free Press, where the finest of feelings were experienced throughout the tournament. Now, that's a little bit of hyperbole, I'm sure, that the Free Press was saying in 1867, but I was not aware of any significant things that would mar the tournament. I don't think anybody was surprised that the final was Canton against Flat Rock. Those are 2 very fine clubs who, of course, anybody could have come up and taken them out in any one game, but I don't think anybody was surprised that those were the 2 that met for the first class championship. I was really delighted to see a couple of clubs, especially the Bovina Dairymen from New York, who were a new club, and their pitcher, who received the Best Pitcher Award, which was an award given in 1867, was really helping us see the smooth, flat pitching that would have been characteristic of the era. Remind us of some other folks of your pitching, of Thumper's pitching from Mount Clemens back in the day. But that was a really great example there. I think we also saw that there were multiple clubs who don't typically play the fly game, and that was a hard thing for them to adjust to in some cases. They were used to, they had outfielders who were used to being able to take balls on the mound for an out, and they struggled a bit at times with the fly game. And I think that was pretty historically accurate when the fly game came in, that there were definitely challenges there. So those are some of the things that I saw in the tournament. And of course, we did bring back the Best Uniform Award, as voted on by the ladies, for beauty and serviceability, with Canton in their new shield front uniforms taking that home.
So we, I would echo that point about, there was not nearly the anger or bad blood that I know there have been times that some teams went away with some sore feelings, and sometimes it's you play the games, you're hot, you're tired, and a bounce doesn't go your way or something to that extent. But man, we had some good baseball, just good baseball all the way around, and it truly did feel like a good supportive environment for that. So I want to run through.
Let me mention one thing that I saw that I almost saw. I almost saw it. Unfortunately, the La-Di-Das had already gotten an out in an inning. And had it not been that they already had gotten one out, they would have turned a triple play. So they made all the way around, but it couldn't be a triple play because one out had already been recorded. But it was a fantastic play to see, with barehanded fielders all the way around the bases. And not just a lot of great plays. There was a line shot in a game I umpired. I mean, it was a hard hit ball that was foul by about 4 inches, and it hit the ground hard. And the third baseman, I believe for Addison, it was for the Addison Mountain Stars, made a fantastic one-handed Olay grab, and that was an out because it was a foul-bound catch. And I don't think most of the players, including the third baseman, realized it was an out at the moment. It happened so quickly. So there was some fantastic baseball.
Yeah, really good defensive plays all around. I know we saw double plays turn everywhere. I know a really nice one in the championship game that I remember seeing here, a double play the hard way. But good ball all around. So we're going to recap these kind of quick and kind of show where we are. So our tournament is, for those who have never been, we have 12 teams. This year we had 12 teams from 5 different states: New York, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Ohio, and Illinois, all coming in here. The 12 teams are grouped into 4 different pods, as it were. So each team is guaranteed 2 games on Saturday and 1 game on Sunday. So 3 games for everybody, 4 games if you win your first Sunday game. And so we'll kind of go, grouping by grouping here. So looking over at the Saturday scores, the 2 home clubs started at 8 a.m., which I know is a thing that we do just so that some of the teams that have been traveling get a little extra time to either rest or to come in and see the village, or hopefully buy a membership. Please buy a membership if you haven't already. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm not kidding. No, do it. But the Lottie Dodds squared off against the Bear Clan Baseball Club of Flat Rock. This was a good close game, except for one inning. And I know that for a lot of us ball players, there's oftentimes we were in it. We just didn't have that one inning. That seemed what we had. Flat Rock has 2 outs and then immediately puts up 12 runs, all with 2 outs in one inning. Flat Rock beats the Latidas 18-8. And over on Walnut Grove number 2, the Capital Baseball Club of Columbus against the Nationals of Greenfield Village. I was a national for the tournament. It had been 12 years since I was a national before. And the Capitals take the win, in this case, 18-7. My big takeaway from that is the Capitals got young, they got fast, and they continue to hit the ball hard. So a great showing for the Capitals there. For the 9:30 game, we go to the other pods here. The other team from Columbus, and I hate to say it is the other team because they are just as good in their own right, the Columbus Buckeyes and the Ganymede Baseball Club of Oregon, Illinois. Oregon always gives it a good run. Good high-scoring affair here. The Buckeyes take the win 21-13, which we can say, high-scoring comparatively. But Marcus, what are some of the averages or some of the scores of the 1867 World Tournament?
Well, the average combined runs, the total runs in the game in the 1867 tournament was 76 runs. Now, that's a 9-inning game, and we are time limited at 80 minutes, but I don't think that's the reason that we have the difference. The average was 76 runs. Some of the scores were, 61-34. The game that I always 55-35, 55-39. One of the games ended up, technically it ended 62-50 because if you don't finish an inning, the score reverts back to the last complete inning. But in the 8th inning, the score was 62-50. I believe it was the Custer Club. They then scored 12 to tie it in the top of the 9th. And in the bottom of the 9th, and I'm blanking on which the club was in the bottom 9th, they scored 1 to win the game and make it 63-62. And the game ended there, which by rule it shouldn't have. So technically there were 125 runs scored. So one club scored 62 runs and lost. The scoring was a little different in that era. Now, that is higher than the national average of scores at that era, but that's what we had in this tournament. So
we could say high scoring, but
high scoring relative to the tournament for sure.
For sure. On Walnut 2, the other 9:30 game, the defending champions, the Corn Shuckers of Canton, Michigan, against the Rochester Grangers. Canton takes the win there 13-2, but that won't be the last we hear of the Grangers. The 11 o'clock game sees the Columbus Capitals with their second game of the day, so they're getting their 2 done early. The Columbus Capitals are taking on the Addison Mountain Stars. I don't know what the emphasis should be, and I'm sure Adam Dirtbag Johnson can correct me. I don't know if it's the Addison Mountain Stars or is it the Addison Mountain Stars?
I believe it's the former.
Okay, so instead of the Addison Mountain Stars, we'll just do it as that, and we'll let them correct me either way. But nevertheless, here another good close game. But the Capitals punch their ticket 13-11 over Addison. On field number 2, this is a game I was looking forward to seeing here. Flat Rock in their second game against the Walker Tavern Wheels, 2-time former champion Walker Tavern Wheels. But Flat Rock jumps up early, and they had just solid defense all day long. Flat Rock beats Walker 11-3. We go to 12:30, and the debut of the Bovina Dairymen at the World Tournament. Now, Bovina has played for seasons before, but it's their introduction to the World Tournament. And again, we were extraordinarily happy to have them here, taking on the Rochester Grangers. A low-scoring affair, to be sure. Bovina was up for a good chunk, and then Rochester pulls away towards the end. The Grangers beat the Bovina Dairymen 8-5 on Walnut Grove number 1. And then on number 2, our friends from Bay City, Michigan, taking on the Ganymedes of Oregon. Bay City had a influx of talent from the former members of the Saginaw Old Golds. For those who haven't heard, the Old Gold Baseball Club is no more, or at least for now is no more. And so several members of the former champion Old Golds have migrated to Bay City. But Oregon's got a game under their belt, and they are a plucky team. Those Ganymedes are like, we had to play them. These are actually the two teams the Ladidas had to beat in 2016 to win the World Tournament, Oregon and Bay City. But the Ganymedes take the win over Bay City, final score of 20-7. 2:00 game, and the Greenfield Village clubs are back at it again. The Ladidas beat Walker Tavern, final score 19-11. And Addison and the Nationals, this another close game, a good close back and forth game. Addison pulls away towards the end, relegates the poor boys from Parma to the third class by a final score of 15-10. And to the 3:30 game, I know a game that many people were looking forward to, the Canton Corn Shuckers and the Bovina Dairymen for placing in their bracket. Bovina again was up. Canton squeaks away towards the end and takes the victory there. Final score of 12-8. And then following that, the Columbus Buckeyes and the Bay City Independents. We're not going to talk about the score, but let's just say the Buckeyes won with a little bit of breathing room in that match. And so that brings us, to our brackets. Our third class bracket would see the Walker Tavern Wheels and Bay City Independents face off, and the Bovina Dairymen and the Nationals at 8 a.m. In that game, Walker Tavern takes the win, and Bay City gets the early ride home. And the Bovina Dairymen and the Nationals, once again, back and forth and back and forth, back and forth. Bovina walks off the Nationals, who were tied it up in the top half of in their half of the inning. Bovina pulls out the win in their half. Final score of that game was 18-15. So Bovina moves on to the finals, and the Nationals, at least they don't have too far to travel to go home. But the Nationals will not be advancing. The 9:30 matches, that's the second class semifinals. The Ladidas take care of business against the Oregon Ganymedes, and they move on second class finals. And on the other side, the Rochester Grangers and the Addison Mountain Stars. Rochester locks up the win there. Another good game. Man, Addison was clawing their way back. It's just one of those things where you just kind of run out of outs. But nevertheless, the Grangers win, setting up Ladidas versus Rochester, a rematch of a game that took place earlier this year in May. But that'll take place a little bit later. And then in the first class semifinals, Flat Rock against the Buckeyes. Flat Rock, I think, was leading at one point 17-0. And that was only after 3 innings. This Flat Rock club could just flat out hit. And unfortunately, the poor Buckeyes were in the way of that. Trust me, I've been on the other end of a Flat Rock shellacking. It's not fun, but at some point you just got to go, what else could I have done? I don't really know. On the other side, quite the opposite. The Corn Shuckers and the Columbus Capitals I mentioned the Capitals got faster, they got younger, and it was on display here.
No. They kind of raise.
So there's a little bit of controversy there. However, the folks from Jackson said, hey, wait a second. You remember 2 years ago in 1865 at the first State of Michigan Championship, which the Detroit Club won.
What's up? Hey.
You know that this is an amateur game. You know that this is an amateur game, but I'm pretty sure that the Detroit Club had brought in some players from New York.
Capitals were moving, they're hitting the ball, they're hitting behind runners. They had tied it up in the last inning, and Canton comes in their half of the last inning and ends up with a base hit, scoring the winning run. Final score there, 8-7, which would set up our first-class championship of Flat Rock and Canton there. For the third-class championship, Bovina against Walker Tavern. Walker Tavern got off to a good start, scored 4 runs in the first inning, held Bovina tight until I think it was about the 4th or 5th inning. Bovina put up 8 runs in the 4th and 9 runs in the 5th to jump out to their lead and eventually secure the victory here. And the Bovina Dairymen from the Catskill Mountains of the state of New York, Bovina wins their first championship and sure won't be their last. They win the third-class championship, defeating the former champions, the Walker Tavern Wheels.
That boy D-Wagon. Go see yours, Devin. Dig. On the bag, ball's there.
Adidas against the Rochester Grangers. They played earlier this year, and we've introduced a new trophy. There is a small bank that the Rochester Grangers painted to have La-Di-Das and Grangers on it, and that essentially is to be a trophy passed back and forth. La-Di-Das won in May, took possession of the trophy, and it's not common that we have other trophies being played for during the World Tournament, but I too many people were asking for it, so I think it was crucial that we have it back out. But the La-Di-Das started hitting and didn't really stop, and secured a big win over the Rochester Grangers. By this point, you could just tell, like, especially when you get later into the innings, and Marcus, you probably saw this too, like, you could tell fatigue was really starting to set in. It was hot. It was a hot one here. It wasn't Gettysburg hot, but it was warm. It was definitely warm, to say the least here. Bringing us to the actually brings us then to the skills competition. Marcus, can you talk a little bit about the skills competition and like some of the other awards that teams received in 1867 that weren't just you're the best baseball team?
They had 2 skills competitions, and they were we've called it the longest throw, but really they referred to it as the best thrower on distance, which would distinguish it from perhaps a best thrower on accuracy. But so it was the longest throw, and it was a challenging thing. They only had a 4.5-foot area to stand in, so you couldn't take a running start. You had essentially a flat-footed throw, and that was won by Devin Rose of the La-Di-Das with a 288-foot throw, which was just almost exactly the same as the winning throw of 290 feet from the.
Sort of hand-foot box is crazy as one step. You get no run into it. He said to go across the line. There you go, Harry. He did come across the line.
Tournament in 1867. And then we had a fastest runner, or the best runner around the bases, where Joe Ace Terwilliger of Canton won, besting the 1867 time by more than a second, which is going around the bases, pretty good. He made it in about 15.3 seconds. So there were those two from 1867 that we did as well. Other awards were given for the finest pitcher, and that went to Mike Brown of the Bovina Dairymen. The finest catcher, which went to Joe Terwilliger of Canton. The finest captain, which went to Bobby Minnow Murkowski of the National Baseball Club of Greenfield Village. For the last several years, the Club from Greatest Distance Award has been won by the Oregon Ganymedes, but I told their captain that their reign of terror was over. The Bovina Dairymen took that award this year, traveling over 600 miles to arrive for our tournament. An award was given. It wasn't an official award, but the sports writers in 1867 they wanted to give a bag of peanuts to the worst beaten club. That was the Tecumseh Club, who were losing 50-11 in the sixth inning of their game when they just quit. They retired from the game. Unfortunately, no one from the Tecumseh Club was there to accept the bag of peanuts. But we always give that award to the two clubs who make it into the third class and then lose that first game on Sunday. And so this year that went to the Independents of Bay City. And Jeff, I hate to say it, but it went to the Nationals of Greenfield Village.
And it's still in my trunk. So for anybody that I see in the next few days, if you would like to taste what 3 losses during the World Tournament tastes like, it is sitting next to my spikes. So
in 1867, there was a vote taken of the ladies present, as I mentioned, for the club wearing the best uniform based on beauty and serviceability, and Canton with their new uniforms, their shield front uniforms, were voted by the ladies best uniform. We give a sportsmanship award that we call the Henry Chadwick Sportsmanship Award to not to an individual, but to an entire club. And that award went to the Addison Mountain Stars. They had a number of calls that didn't go their way, close calls that didn't go their way, situations that just didn't break their way, and we heard not a word about it. They were the model baseball player in every way. So Addison received the Henry Chadwick Sportsmanship Award, and those are the awards.
So it's extra little something fun that we like to add in there. I want to give a real quick shout out to Miles Morse of the Rochester Grangers, who was not only the third class or the third place winner in longest throw at 243 feet, but was also third place in fastest runner at 16.2 seconds. So a real athlete that can do well in both events here. I will.
1, 2, 3, go!
I want to add in just real quickly here with regard to fastest runner. There was unofficially a kind of a gray hair division between myself and Lenny DeRocher of the Bear Clan Baseball Club. And so I think we were and as far as fastest runners go, I think we were the only two guys that had gray hair and still had the courage to get out there and run it. But I'll give the credit to Lenny there, who bested me 17.2 seconds to my 17.7, which I'll take 17. In fact, I'll go as far to say that my time was declared admirable. So take that, everybody else. I'm admirable. So anyway, so onto the championship game, a rematch from a couple of years ago, Flat Rock Bear Clan against the Cornshucker Baseball Club of Canton. So as we're kind of looking here at the start, Flat Rock's a team that once they start hitting, it's really tough to slow them down. Just even looking briefly at some of the scoring here, this is a club. Like I said, I've just lost my score, but I'm trying to find it here real quick. The team, there it is. That's the picture I wanted. First 3 innings, the Bear Clan was leading 17-2. I mean, it's hard to motivate yourself and fire yourself up to get back into it here, from that. So all the credit in the world to the Cornshuckers for exhibiting the true American spirit, I think would be a good way to classify it there. But the Bear Clan comes out on top. Final score of 31-9, and Flat Rock brings home their second World Tournament in 3 years. And like I said, I'm not surprised. Like you said, Marcus, I am not surprised that these were the 2 teams that came to the championship round. Both very deserving, kind of playing 2 different games here,
Very
power
much.
versus speed, which can make for a really entertaining game, as I know these teams have swapped wins and losses back and forth with each other. So with that, we're gonna wrap up this episode here. As the tournament is always for a lot of people, it's the end of the summer, and then we got to start thinking about our adult jobs, especially for those of us in the education world. We got to go back to teaching, but not on a baseball field, in a little bit of a different way. So, Marcus, appreciate you joining me for this here. I know the World Tournament's a big deal for you as well, and thanks for your insights and your research and knowledge on it.
Oh, thanks very much for the opportunity.
Absolutely. So with that, everybody, we're gonna stop it on this episode here, but know that there's going to be more to come. We've got some more games and more things to talk about for the rest of our season here, including a really exciting game played by the rules of 1876. So stand by. That episode will be coming very, very soon to you. In the meantime, stay safe, strike well, hurrah to you all, and we hope you enjoy another rousing game of vintage baseball in the very near future here. Take care, everybody, and have a pleasant rest of your season.